none of us is promised tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we need to recognize that it doesn't matter how old we are. We need to do this for other people who will have these tasks when we're gone. And it makes it a lot easier if we're organized.
Welcome to the 4th season of Heart to Heart with Michael, a program for the bereaved community. Our purpose is to empower members of our community. This season, we're looking at grief in its various forms, and today we'll be looking at how important financial planning is to the role of trauma as it affects grief. Today's program is Eldercare Financial Planning, and our guest is Miriam Whiteley, CFP. Miriam Whiteley is a certified financial planning professional who specializes in helping folks navigate age-related financial transitions. She's a certified financial transitionist and holds a certification in end-of-life care and support. Ms. Whiteley earned a BS in business finance and intended to have a financial planning career. Instead, she became a mother and then a Waldorf class teacher. About 15 years ago, she read a book about financial life planning and it reignited her spark. And by 2016, she made a career change and became a certified financial planner professional. By that time, she'd become her parents' daily money manager and healthcare advocate, and she knew she wanted to specialize in elder care planning. Miriam Whiteley earned an end-of-life care and support certificate to enhance her understanding of the aging process and to help her clients prepare for, rather than repair from, age-related changes. Ms. Whiteley believes planning well leads to more confidence because you know you're maximizing your resources. This confidence strengthens your resilience and your ability to bounce back from stress and challenge, and that helps you age well. Miriam, thank you so much for coming to the program. It's a pleasure to see you.
You're welcome, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Now, this topic is particularly close to my heart because I have a mother who's 93 years old. She's not in the best of health. And in the course of this program, I'm going to try and pick your brains a little bit about how we can make some end-of-life plans for parents, things that we need to know if we're in a sandwich generation to make our children's lives easier. So really, we have 3 different generations of people that we can talk about in today's program. So let's start talking about our elderly parents. What do we need to know to even get started in this process?
One of the things we see as our parents age is that they do get more vulnerable. They're going to live longer, and there are challenges to that in terms of health and also cognitive abilities. One of the things that is the first to go is the ability to sequence, that kind of executive functioning ability to say, if this happens, then I will do this, and when I do this, then that will happen. So let's take this into the financial realm. If I get sick and I need to use up my money here, then what I will want to do is sell my house and go live with my daughter. That's one example. That kind of sequencing ability people need to do when they still can, because that is one of the things that starts to diminish. So
I would imagine that they need not only to do that, but they need to tell somebody, right?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely being prepared for the changes and the transitions. Change is going to happen. So we can either let that change shape us, or we can lean in and shape the changes that are coming. And definitely what you just said, we need to understand what to look for. Several studies have suggested that either from mild to severe dementia, people will tell you they continue to feel very confident about handling financial matters. That's one of the reasons people don't tell other people, because they think they're just fine. And also, we see money as a way that we can express our independence. In fact, what erodes pretty early in cognitive decline are good financial decisions, which makes our parents vulnerable to things like scammers, requests for money, friends and family, and also making investment decisions that really aren't suitable for where they are. So you need to know what to watch for. Memory loss that disrupts daily life, also difficulty with familiar tasks that people could do with ease before, and especially confusion around time and place. We all get a little more forgetful as we age. Certain things are quite normal, but those are 3 areas to really watch for. The other thing is there's a very delicate balance here. So yes, we need to have the conversation, and we need to approach it with sensitivity. The person who began and founded assisted living communities actually comes from Oregon, and she says what we want for ourselves is freedom, and what we want for our loved ones is safety. So we need to balance that our parents want to still be independent. They want to still be free, and we need to be careful about the way we approach this conversation. And we also really need to have the information. We need to know what they want, and we need to know where the documents are so that we can do the best for them while they're here and afterward.
I think that is not only a difficult line for us as children, as future caretakers, but I remember my father. It was very difficult for him. He understood, I think, that we were helping him financially in terms of doing things, not in terms of giving money. I understood sometimes when he felt that was necessary and understood it, and then there were other times he felt very, very much encroached.
Yes.
How do we talk to our parents and try not to make them feel like we're stepping in their space? Because we really are.
I think the first thing you're just saying is important, that we acknowledge to ourselves that this is hard. And, everybody has their own communication styles with their parents, but it really helped for me with my mom to acknowledge together how hard it was. We really think we can make it right by talking, and actually talking isn't so easy to process as cognitive decline is setting in. So it's very important to be using a sense of humor that translates past words.
Really?
To, we are finding so much happens with music and memories, emotions. So getting them into a frame of mind that is a little more comforted, maybe singing an old familiar song or doing things that can put them at ease, not in a moment of frustration, taking it out in a hard way, using being really careful, tone of voice, facial expression, body language, so that we aren't feeling overbearing. We're not standing up and talking down at them, even physically. We need to really watch for those things. What we know about this is that adult parents want to have the conversations with their children. They don't know how to bring it up because they don't want to burden them. But if we don't have the conversations, it's a real burden later when you're trying to figure stuff out.
I have tried to bring things up with my daughter about our future, and she says, I don't need to know about this. I don't want to talk about this. It's upsetting to me. My daughter doesn't want to talk about it, and we're both lucid, and I'm fairly young, and she's younger, and she don't want to talk about it. But I want to go back for a second. You mentioned something really important. We need to know where the documents are. So what kind of documents should we have?
The list of documents that are important to keep, I'm going to make a distinction. Some of them, it's really helpful to have available to you, for instance, on your phone, to store in the cloud in whatever method that works for you. There are apps that you can do that. But for instance, one of the documents that is necessary goes by different names: a healthcare power of attorney, a durable, power of attorney, living will, advanced directive, they're frequently called. They set forth what it is you want in terms of medical response if you were to be in an end-of-life situation, a threatened end-of-life situation. Do you want to be intubated? Do you want CPR, that sort of thing? Well, my mom had made the decision she really did not want to be resuscitated, but she had health conditions that would involve calling in the emergency technicians. They'd take her to the hospital, and it was very helpful for me to have on my phone her advanced directive so that I could bring it up no matter where I was. You can't always go back home. So some things you want really available to you, and some things you just need to know where they are. Is the will available? Is it the most current one? You definitely want to know from your parents where they store that. Accounts, where their bank accounts are, where their retirement accounts are, where life insurance policies are. I can't tell you how many times I have clients who discover them as they're going through file cabinets because they haven't been put all in one place.
Everything in my mom's house is stored in a friendly black hole.
And if you find that one black hole, then you might be lucky, but it could be that it'll be very hard to find. And then in our world right now, a lot of things are done digitally. So making sure you know where the passwords are. There are some electronic solutions to this. There are digital vaults that I set up, for instance, with my mom so that I could be have access to all of the information she had access to. And that worked for as long as she was able to access it. We could upload documents to that. That would be secure. So whatever you do, a password manager where you give permissions to people to know your passwords, whether you write it down in a book that is safely stored. I will say having these things be safe is important, especially if caregivers are in the home. You definitely need things like birth certificate, social security number, prescription information, various health conditions. The last thing I'll say is that at some point you're going to want to memorialize your parents' lives. And it was a very interesting thing that even though we'd been very conscious about this with my mom, after she died, my brother was writing her obituary, and we realized that among the 5 siblings, we couldn't actually remember a pretty significant date of when I think it was some schooling, when she'd earned a degree, and she was no longer there to ask. So make sure you have that basic information preserved. Again, there are lots of ways to do that, and I can talk about that a little more in terms of legacy gifts and what we leave behind. But you want documents that will help you put together the pieces of your parents' life and help you do the next steps that are time-consuming and complicated at a time when people are already grieving. So it's never too late. Start wherever you are.
A lot of this advice, which is stunningly good advice, but it's for me to give to my children. My mom was born in the 1920s, and the world was a very different place and very tormented. And I can't imagine that she has anything anywhere on the cloud. What's a cloud? What's a password?
Yeah, and what I have found, people, as we've all moved to remote work, I do most of my meetings with clients on Zoom, actually right now, all of my meetings, and many of my clients are older. And they've been very adept figuring Zoom out. So I don't think we're finding that it's entirely generational. There are definitely personalities that have adapted more easily to the world of the internet. And actually, one of the faster growing Facebook communities is really among older people. And that's just, one little area where people sometimes don't recognize that our parents are active. And Facebook has an opportunity that you can name somebody as your successor that can get access to your account, can post information if something happens to you. So it could be true for your mom and for many people that they will find that their parents don't have an internet presence. On the flip side, one of the things that people often need to start stepping in and doing is monitoring accounts. I actually recommend that. If you feel like there's the possibility that you're seeing changes in your parents, and getting access to bank account information is very doable. But then you've started an online presence. So it's at least something to ask about. And I can relate to what you're saying about your daughter not wanting to talk about it. My children are in their 20s and they don't want to talk about it very much either.
Exactly.
But I've sent them the file. I've told them where it is located on my computer. I trust that somewhere they'll keep that email. And if they need to, because none of us is promised tomorrow. Yeah. So we need to recognize that it doesn't matter how old we are. We need to do this for other people who will have these tasks when we're gone. And it makes it a lot easier if we're organized.
Home Tonight Forever by the Baby Blue Sound Collective.
I think what I love so much about this CD is that some of the songs were inspired by the patients.
Many listeners will understand many of the different songs and what they've been inspired by. Our new album will be available on iTunes, Amazon.com, Spotify.
I love the fact that the proceeds from this CD are actually going to help those with congenital heart defects.
Enjoy the music.
Home Tonight Forever.
Hi, my name is Jamie Alcroft, and I just published my new book, The Man Diaries. It's an amazing story of my sudden change of heart as I went through a heart and liver transplant. I can think of no better way to read The Man Diaries than to cuddle up in your favorite Hearts Unite the Globe sweatshirt and your favorite hot beverage, of course, in your Hearts Unite the Globe mug, both of which are available at the Hug Podcast Network online store, or visit heartsunitetheglobe.org.
This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
The opinions expressed in the podcast are not those of Hearts Unite the Globe, but of the hosts and guests, and are intended to spark discussion about issues pertaining to congenital heart disease or bereavement.
You are listening to Heart to Heart with Michael. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on Michael's program, please email him at michael@hearttoheartwithmichael.com. Now, back to our program.
What documents should I have prepared for my wife and for myself? And what do I need to let my children know?
Well, these are, I would say the really important thing is to think about, how do I want to be remembered? And that will help you inform the question of what to keep in terms of stuff. Because what we really want to have around us are those cherished items that preserve those stories and those memories. One experience I had when my mom died was we were left with an enormous pile of stuff that no one wanted, and frankly wasn't all that important to her either. But then when we went through the boxes of things in her garage, she had these cups that were from my great-grandmother and my grandfather that had traveled all the way from the Midwest in one small car and a trailer. So clearly they mattered to somebody when they moved out west when she was 13, but we didn't know anything about them. And I decided at that moment, I'm going to sort my stuff. I'm going to write stories about the things I've kept so that my children know what mattered to me, and then it'll be up to them to decide what of it they want to keep. One of the things that happens is generational wealth transfers down, and almost all the time it is squandered by the third generation. And a lot of that is because people aren't connected to what made it possible to create it in the first place. So it's all the same documents we talked about. Make sure you have a will if it's appropriate for your situation. Have a trust. Make sure your kids, when you're able, when you've really thought about what it is you want to tell them. And this is very unique to people, how much they want their inheritor, their potential beneficiaries, to know what's coming to them. But I think it's very useful, especially in situations where you might have very different needs among your children, and there's going to be an unequal distribution, that there is some conversation about why that is. That, again, I can't make a blanket rule for everybody, but it's something to at least think about. One thing that people really do overlook is beneficiary designations on things like their retirement plans, and in the United States, it's called an IRA. It's very important not only to have a primary beneficiary, but a contingent beneficiary. If you have assets sufficient to go see an estate attorney, you can get a package deal, have somebody professional look it over, and make sure that your assets are titled correctly to make the passing of them the optimal way you want to do it. So, for instance, sometimes married couples will hold individual accounts. They can set those up to transfer on death directly to somebody else. One of the things people do is, as they're beginning to be concerned about competence, they might name one of their adult children as a joint owner on an account. This is really problematic because when your parent dies, that asset, that account, becomes owned by the adult child. And let's say there are 4 children, but the mom or dad was working primarily with one of them. It probably isn't the intent that that one child gets everything in that account. So it's just very helpful to have open communication. If the family dynamics are such that that's possible, sometimes they need help. I love doing family meetings.
Now, the truth is I have very, very little to give to anybody. Basically, I have what I'm wearing and the house I live in, and that's it. But there are people who have real holdings, who have real accounts, who have real sums of money. I think the best thing you can do is get a professional. Where do I find one?
Well, a really good place to go is to look at the website for certified financial planners. Many financial planners help with generational wealth transfer, and we oversee all aspects, a holistic picture. So we look at estate planning, risk management with insurance, what's happening with taxes and optimizing that. We don't write wills and trusts. We don't do the estate planning, but we can sort of be the quarterback on the team with other advisors. And to some extent, it does really matter how many assets people have, and to some extent it really doesn't. You mentioned you've got your house. You want to make sure that's properly titled. You want to make sure you have a will that expresses what your true wishes are, and you want to update these things and look at them in terms of the tax changes. Many changes have happened with tax laws just recently that have changed how long people can distribute their retirement account. It used to be that you could stretch it over the inheritor's lifetime, and now it's limited to 10 years in most situations. So people need to really think about changes that they might make to the way they've set that up. We see people who get themselves into some debt. It becomes overwhelming. They don't open the accounts anymore. We really need to find a way to create some momentum, and usually that's by starting small. So you and I can agree tomorrow you're going to look at your beneficiaries to make sure it's not your dad who's passed on. That's not going to be useful for your daughter if this becomes necessary. That will just be a headache she has to fix. So whatever motivates you, in this case, I'm hearing your children and your wife are important to you. Yeah. Make this so that it's easy for them. That's your motivation to get it done, and then pick something really manageable. I think a lot of people find when they start somewhere, they begin to open the envelope, they make that first phone call, it gets easier to do.
I was 5 hours old when I had my first surgery.
Wow.
The only advice I can really give someone like that is to be there for your family.
This is life, and you have two choices. You either live it or you sit in a corner and cry.
I am Anna Jaworski and the host of Heart to Heart with Anna. Join us on Tuesdays at noon Eastern Time on Spreaker or Blog Talk Radio. We'll cover topics of importance for the congenital heart defect community. Remember, my friends, you are not alone.
If you've enjoyed listening to this program, please visit our website, heartsunitetheglobe.org, and make a contribution. This program is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe and is part of the Hug Podcast Network. Hearts Unite the Globe is a nonprofit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to educate, empower, and enrich the lives of our community members. If you would like access to free resources pertaining to the CHD community, please visit our website at congenitalheartdefects.com for information about CHD, hospitals that treat CHD survivors, summer camps for CHD families, and much, much more.
You are listening to Heart to Heart with Michael. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our program, please send an email to Michael Lieben at michael@hearttoheartwithmichael.com. Now, back to Heart with Michael.
Corona has got people really, really spooked. What should families be doing now so that, Corona could be sudden. People can get sick and it could be gone in a week. What are the things that we can do right now if we have done nothing else? What should we do tomorrow? What's the most hot thing that we got to touch right away?
I can tell you what I did. When you make an advance directive, that's where you set out if a doctor thinks that I don't have a chance, a good chance of surviving something without intervention, how much intervention, what kind do I want? So having the conversation about why you feel that way, right. Under what circumstances would you want to be intubated? If it would be, one of the really difficult situations with COVID is you have to sedate people in order to intubate them. Intubation is really uncomfortable. Yeah. So if they don't recover, that decision to do that is the last time you actually have to say goodbye or to say the last things you want to say. And many families find that there's a real closure that can come in those final hours and days that people are largely having interrupted. All of these incredibly sad situations where families drop somebody off at the emergency room, having no idea that it's going to progress, and they won't ever see them again. And it's leaving people with what is called ambiguous loss in the grief world. You don't really feel like you've said goodbye. What people should be doing is everything we've been talking about, but you're saying let's put an urgency on it. Call that child or sister or uncle that you didn't speak to and have a conversation with them. It's not a goodbye conversation. It's say the things that haven't been said yet, that need to be said. And I think when most people sit quietly for a moment and just explore that, what have I not done yet? What is there left for me to do? Things come to mind.
You're right. I think people need to really sit down for a minute and get sober about this and say, with or without Corona, I could walk out the door and get hit. Corona just makes it more sharp in people's minds.
Sure. I think in a way we've been talking in our culture about the fact that we need to get more comfortable talking about dying. There are things like death cafes. Hospice has become much more acceptable. There are more palliative care physicians who help people be comfortable at the end of life. We're really trying to have this conversation, and it's prompted in part because medicine has advanced so greatly that both people are living a lot longer. So they're not just, sort of living, get a sudden disease, and then they're no longer with us, but people are dealing with chronic conditions for years and years and years. And that creates a disease trajectory where they'll get very, very sick, and it looks like they might die, and then they get much better. So once you start riding that roller coaster with your mom or dad, you begin to realize that this is not going to be a simple, straightforward situation. You're going to be faced with a lot of hard questions. And the thing that we all need to realize is this is true for finance, and this is true for our health. What are we willing to sacrifice today to protect our possibilities for tomorrow? And what I'm saying with the prepare is better than repair, we can make mistakes. You could not have your beneficiaries up to date, and that will really be a hassle for people you love if something were to happen to you. So that's the thing. Take a moment, prepare, then somebody else isn't having to fix it and repair it, something that could have been very simple to do.
Can you give me an example of what happens when it goes wrong? Can you show me what repair is like?
Repair can look like a variety of different things. One thing that comes to mind we've already touched on quite a bit, and that is beneficiary designations. I've had a situation where the couple died very close together, and we were aware that they had named each other as their primary beneficiaries, and we had not put in place their secondary. We were about to do that with the one who was living, and then that surviving spouse passed on. So that creates just a lot of paperwork. It's not that there aren't things that can be done, but it involves paying attorneys for it. It involves working with professionals like me. Another case that comes to mind is where there were, at one point in the lives of the parents, a lot of various insurance products, but over time, some got canceled, some got paid off. It was a very long process to track all of those down. And so really what is lost is time and energy, and this is at a time when people are already grieving and have plenty of other ways they'd like to spend their time. And then I would say the more difficult and painful are when people have not been comfortable with open communication, and you have a distribution from an estate that the children didn't know it was going to go that way. They didn't know that certain things would go to other siblings, or they felt like it was unfair. This can lead to permanent fractures in families. And with some conversation, with some trying to overcome some of the places where there had been potentially miscommunication or judgment that had been received but not intended, those are conversations that you can have when people are still living. The repair to those, wounds can hurt and they also heal, but scars remain. So it's the things that need to be taken care of in our lifetimes that I urge people to do. Those are more difficult than arranging the paperwork. Both are really important.
Let's go a little bit further from there. There's a reason you're here. You're not just speaking out of the air. You're a lovely person, and I think you're very knowledgeable, but you're also a professional. Your company has a website. Let's hear about that. And how can people reach you if they need you?
Sure. So thank you for asking. I'm at roehl-yi.com. That's rollandye.com. And I do a variety of services for people. So I'm happy to send out some resources. Some of the things I've talked about, I have prepared in lists. So you can reach me through that website and ask me for some of those resources, all the way to the things that we've talked about with financial planning and family meetings.
my first piece of advice is, if you are as overwhelmed as I am right at this moment, and trust me, I'm seriously overwhelmed, get a professional. Talk to somebody who knows what to do, who, like you said, can be a quarterback and can point you in the right direction and give you a plan and make sure that you're doing the things you need to be doing. This is of critical importance. Anybody who's listening now, the most perhaps precious piece of advice we've ever given is how to plan for yourself for when you will not be here. And if you love the people who you're leaving behind, the best thing you can do for them is to plan with them and make everybody know what is what you have, where it is, and put everybody on the same page so they know how to move forward in your honor, in your memory, they're building your legacy, and you're giving them the pieces. It's a puzzle. You're giving them the pieces.
Beautifully said. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you so much. But I do really believe that. And I also believe that I am now infinitely smarter than I was a half hour ago. Miriam, thank you so much for joining us on this program.
You're very welcome, Michael. Thank you for having me. This was a pleasure.
And this concludes this episode of Heart to Heart with Michael. I want to thank Miriam Whiteley for sharing her experience and her advice with us. Please join us at the beginning of the month for a brand new podcast. I will talk with you soon, but until then, please remember, moving forward is not moving away.
Thank you again for joining us. We hope you have gained strength from listening to our program. Heart to Heart with Michael can be heard every Thursday at noon Eastern Time. We'll talk again next time when we'll share more stories.